this whole
Yeah.
Improvisation.
Bear with me though,
Good
because
stuff.
I don't have much of a voice
that's
right now.
mean of me, then forget it. Do you want to, because I don't want to.
Sure. So, this brainchild is the product of a wish by Robert Wilson that Matt and I would collaborate on some stories, and it turned into a box set called Secret Gateways, and the little chapbook that you see in our hands right now is actually, these are advanced reading copies of the slim volume. We wrote about 22,000 words between us, and very happy with the results.
And the process.
And the process, yeah, which was the dream. The story that we're going to read is the final story in the sequence of stories, and it is called the Latham-Fielding Liaison.
It's written in the form of letters back and forth between these two characters that we basically sent to each other as emails in character, and a lot of improvisational stuff in here. We didn't go back really and fix a lot of things. We just kind of let it develop as it did. So, all right, are we ready to start?
Go ahead.
All right, I will begin. Fielding. I have a fear that you will find this letter in your receptacle, stare for a few shocked moments at the postmark and return address, and drop it without ceremony into the fire. How did he find me, you must be wondering. I did. That's all that matters, or doesn't matter if you do decide to burn this missive. I remember school with a great fondness, and even the times of strife and anxiety and blood. I remember the nights in the auditorium with dubious nostalgia. And of course, I remember the thing about which we must not talk. I still consider Gregory. I wonder how he is. I wonder if he is. It's unaccountably strange to be writing to you after so long. It's stoking in me a strange upset, as though I'm seeing you face to face as you were. It's almost as strange to encounter in the mirror the bleak image of a man in his 40s. I believe that if one is to have a lifespan at all, it should last no more than 40 years. Beyond that, we become too absurd to continue, even more absurd than we always were. Degenerated and degraded, a bad painting of our younger selves rendered by an artist who is a collection of tics and derangements and impairments. But worse. I find myself, say, walking between the booths and the counter in the Bluebonnet Diner, and I pick up conversations of the most exquisite malarkey, of the most vapid and rotting corporate bafflegab. I was going to provide examples, but you know them all, don't you? You may have even uttered a lot of these phrases yourself. We can't help it sometimes when we are paying for coffee or ducking past someone who's blocking the sidewalk. I think better of you, but who knows? It's enough to stun one into silence. I've been having an experience lately I thought I'd share to see if you have had this happen to you as well. To see if there's still that special connection. In darkness, I consider my heart. In silence, I consider my heart. It floats in its dark chamber, flub of flubbing. I'm aware of the shadowy basics of it, energy, signals sent from the creepy brain creature down the superhighway of the spinal column. I know it's been explained away, but still, how? How does it keep itself going in there? It is a thing that should not be. I sometimes think I could make it stop if I tried, interrupt and corrupt the signal at the brain and send down one word. Stop. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Stop. 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 In any event, I'm here in my 40s in a city called Leeds, Massachusetts, which sits between a curve of the Connecticut River and an opposing curve of the interstate, nestled like a creature about to pounce on the world. It drew me with its secrets and its conduits and its old places and its creepy brain creature and its wormy singing voice. It distracts me from considering my heart. I think it is speaking to me with a higher purpose. I am now considering whether to throw this into the fire my own self and spare you the trouble. If I reread it, I'll see that it consists of the most exquisite malarkey. No, I'll send it. I hope for a reply, but I understand if you demur. I would not blame you. Yours, Latham.
Latham. Fuck you. I had a dream the night before your letter arrived in which we were at the old Knollwood apartments. I had been visiting you there with your grown kids, and I was bidding you all a tearful goodbye. What a joke. I've had a lot of dreams with you in them over the past month. Kind of strange to say, but my subconscious reality almost seems like it was ahead of my conscious one. Funny story. I knew your soggy letter with its little kid scrawl would be in the box just before I opened it. Leeds? Sounds awful. And cold. There's also a Leeds somewhere up in central Alabama, a couple of miles, 100 miles from here, and it's filled with twisted trees and rusted out pickups and leering inbred rednecks. My one visit to the place left my skin barely intact. Your Leeds is, I'm sure, no better. I always knew we'd both end up in hell. Which reminds me, there's a kind of amusement park down here that you might like. I've been in there repeatedly. The indoor swamp. It's more interesting than it sounds. Although it does get creepy near the end with these trailer tableaus, which are straight from the trailer that my dad's mother and stepdad lived in until their deaths. The last door that the boat goes through it is the door to what appears to be their bedroom. I dream about that trailer quite a lot. The bedroom on the other side of it has a trap door that leads into a kind of underworld area, part D&D dungeons and part airport and part haunted house tour. Makes me think of the extra-dimensional space of old. Another funny story. Gregory is here in Dunstown with me. I haven't told you about this. I haven't told him about this letter yet. It should be stimulating to see what he thinks. I expect he'll respond with a shrug and a grin. Never mind, we all haven't communicated as the three for the better part of 30 years. Don't worry. If Gregory tells me we need to discuss the thing about which we must not talk, I'm going to balk and lob it back at him. Or maybe he won't say anything at all. The three. Sel Shoftim, the shadow judges. Remember? Of course you do. That takes me back to your favorite Bible verse. Is it still? Even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not pure in his sight. How much less man, a worm, the son of man, a maggot. Job 25:5. Which reminds me, your creepy fucking morbid heart-stopping bit gave me the chills. Special motherfucking connection still in place. See, I was diagnosed with heart disease last month after having what felt like my all-time worst panic attack, and they found some blockages. Naturally, I quickly traveled away from this medical hick town and region and got to a real diagnosis at a decent hospital up north. Turns out the blockages are worse than reported in Alabama, surprise, surprise, and are in a dangerous location. A stent is needed as a stopgap solution. Unfortunately, I'm allergic to the nickel contained within most stents. although Gregory claims my long-time allergies are simply hypochondria. I'm having bad reactions to the medicine I must take for my body to accept the stent. Long and short, the white coats are looking for stents without nickel in them, without success. And they're trying me out on new meds to see if I can tolerate them. If not, I'll need bypass surgery. I think I'm going to need bypass surgery. And I'm scared shitless at the prospect. One of the valves is the same one that did Dad in, the Widowmaker. So, in brief, stop your own goddamned heart and leave mine alone. I'm doing just fine, fucking me up all on my own. My 40s, incidentally, have been the very best of my life, thank you very much, and I'd be glad to degrade and degenerate past all recognition of the miserable, lonely little shits we were back in college. Just let me suck oxygen a little while longer. Why the fuck am I telling you all this? I've written and thrown away this goddamn reply 3 times, meaning to strip out personal info, and I end up writing the same things over and over. Personal as ever, even at this distance between us. All my business given freely to you, as always. Damn you, Latham. Also, fuck you for your vapid and rotting corporate bafflegab dig. Success didn't come easy for me, and it's not thanks to business bullshitting or smiling like a goddamn dime store dummy, whatever you may think. Did you know the Latin for mannequin is homunculus? Speaking of which, how are the kids? As ever, Fielding. P.S. Gregory says hi. P.S.S. I did burn your letter, just now. It smelled like your farts always did back in the day as it went up in the fireplace. Maybe I'll piss on the ashes for good measure.
Dearest, most precious Fielding, it is heartening, get it? To see that you have not much changed. Vulgarities as punctuation, invective and vitriol, and unimaginative insults. These were always your way. I see that it got you far. At any rate, let us take your silly letter paragraph by paragraph. The Knollwood, what a terrible property. I remember the bathtub and toilet and sinks filling with black water and leaves and the desiccated carapaces of insects and the devil knows what. I remember the leaking ceiling and the rats whose eyes glowed like sepia stars from the pantry. All the food in metal boxes to keep it safe. I remember the sagging ceiling and the splintery floor and the oil tank, which shuddered like a great rusted grandmother every time one touched the thermostat. And how the place stayed resolutely cold no matter what one did. Anyway, in case you're wondering, I did detect your veiled accusation, and I can say with all assurance that I have not deliberately wormed my way into your stupid dreams. I'd sooner step into your cobwebbed head than I would move back into the damned Knollwood. That is all you and your trickster brain creature. And Leeds is lovely. Its shadows are a perfect place in which to do one's work. The churches there are being sold off due to low attendance. One of them is slated to be a drug house, another a gentleman's club. My veins twitch and dance with elation when I see the hysterical reactions in the letters to the editor section of our local paper. And the restaurants here are world class. If it's hell, I'd better start stepping up my wickedness, for I want to stay after I die. Did you know, my darling Fielding, one can adjust the heat in one's home, the Knollwood excluded. Do you know that one might don a scarf and a hat and walk into the cold without being assailed by it? Such a pity, poor Fielding, always cold, cold as a grandmother. The indoor swamp sounds wretched. Gregory is in Dunstown? Doing what? Are you fooling with me? I confess you have taken me aback. Is he well? The last I recall, his eyes had switched places and his faculties had been compromised irrevocably, I'd thought. Do you keep him in a cage? Is he still violent? Can he truly speak? as you seem to indicate. Gregory with you? I feel curiously left out, as you both sometimes made me feel in school with your conspiring and whispering, your private jokes, and your excluding me from certain events. I don't like to feel this way. I'm too powerful now to feel this way. And I'd all but forgotten about that feeling, focusing instead on the changes we made when we moved the river to sing its secrets. What Carol said that night in the murky pond in the park across the street, the four words that changed everything. What we made the crowds do, what we did to the moon. Shadow judges. We were giants, weren't we? Could we find that again? Could we have that again? And how dare you bring up old Job, naked I will depart. I know that's what you're referring to, you loudon scoundrel. That's what I said that night when I went into the common for the sixth ritual, and you likened me to a maggot with my furrows and my paleness, and for what I did to scrub away your face with magic. You have always adored me. It shows in your letter. Gods, I'm drunk. I'm sorry to hear about your heart. At least it's confirmation that you have one. See, I can be mean too. I could start and stop hearts at will once. Age makes fools of us all, even you, all proud to be 40 as though that's some kind of achievement. You're fooling yourself, son. If you were miserable and lonely in school, you hid it well. You think you have it so great. Using your powers for money, adapting the language of damned fools. I'm going to throw up. I threw up. I'll leave my stained fingerprints on the side of the paper in the hope that you'll touch them and be sick yourself. You know how the kids are, you savage. Latham. P.S. The silence and the clicking of the pipes was driving me mad, so I put on the radio to drown it out while I wrote this. I've only been half listening. Fielding, what have you done? Why am I hearing Gregory's voice? What language is that? Why is he singing? I know now. I know what you've done. I know now that it was you who caused me to write that first letter just so you could respond and insult me and think it was me who spurred you on. Or was it Gregory? Answer me, or by the devil I'm coming to find you both. We could have a good meal. Talk about old times. Postcard of a platypus wearing a fedora. Now I'm confused. Which of this is Fielding? The day after I sent my letter, guess who knocked on my door? Gregory. He knows nothing of Dunstown and hasn't seen you since a year after we were removed from the university campus. We have plans to catch up tomorrow, and he may even rent my spare room. So either you have an imposter on your hands, or I've exposed you as a liar. Ha! I wait your reply. L.
La Flemme. Is that absurd cartoon what passes for art in literally leads? Gods, there are none. Leads. Sounds like slang for a common venereal disease. But enough foreplay. I did puke when I got your last proper letter, but it wasn't from your vomit-stained envelope, which has the texture and scent of peppermint. No, it was the letter's contents that did me in. First I giggled, then I guffawed. Finally, I fucking cackled enough to make these old ribs squawk and the old ticker skip some beats. Not healthy in my condition. The tig about my limited imagination stung, which means it got the loudest and most painful laugh. Then I puked up the 3 nickels Gregory compelled me to consume a few hours before, which likely saved my life. I'm allergic to nickel, as I think I mentioned before. If your intention was to give this geezer a heart attack, it backfired. On the darker side, the incessant, hilarious gagging pulled something in my back. Thanks, bud. I've either got a bulging or a ruptured disc now, but I still live. The dear old Knollwood, of course, was nothing like your purple prose description of it, but it depicted the state of my mother's house here in Dummies Town, down to the hideous oil tank and rat-like squirrels. Yes, I've been living with my mother again. Of course, you already knew this. That's how you tracked me down. Me, a man pushing 50. We both are, you know. Living with his mother. Did you talk to her on the phone? She's a nightmare since my brother's suicide, which she knows I instigated. If only she knew the whole truth. Grandmother is also somehow still alive since you obliquely asked. Still running the show down here as usual, more or less. You do remember Dunstown, don't you? The indoor swamp isn't what you think. It wasn't what I thought it was either. It's a tedious soul trap, which I barely escaped. You'd adore it. And yes, you old sod. Of course I love you. And despise you, as I love and despise myself. You are the brother I never had, the one I haven't killed yet. Give us time, Flemmy. Speaking of which, I'm not surprised Gregory showed up at your doorstep, or that he's capable of bilocation or superposition, if you want to get scientific about it. I thought about overnighting this letter to warn you against inviting him to stay with you, but I know even that would have proven too late. And sure, I also wanted to share with you the exquisite misery of Gregory's company. How's the old dummy treating you? An imposter? Would that he were. Then again, I've never really known the shit stain. He was always your friend, not mine. Before the thing about which we must talk, before the shadow judges, or the drugs, the fucking, the binging, all our Crowley-esque hijinks, it was you and me. You brought him into the equation. The single most annoying fucking third wheel ever created. Gregory Denson, self-styled Baron von Puss. Remember? He was always your friend, not mine. Never, no matter what he claims. You know, freaks like the Baron always gravitated to you. It astounds me to think about how the two of us humiliated him in the vilest ways once. Once upon a time, remember that night we forced him to ride in the car's trunk for hours on end? Before the evening was out, you had pity on him, even letting Puss drive. Ooh, the Baron driving Le Baron. Back then there was no three, there was only two, and one miserable fuck. But then the thing about which we must not talk happened. Be careful of Gregory Latham. We should both be very careful now. The tapping you heard in the pipes was a plaster mouth opening and snapping shut in the darkness. Oh shit, I must be off. Mother is screaming for me again. I swear, that goddamned woman. Nothing I do is enough for her, and she always has a pointed comment to make. She's changed very much over the past decades, as many psychotics do. Used to be as quiet and meek as a mouse, but now talks all the time and says any old thing that pops into her head, no matter how insulting or annoying. Oh, shit. Kind of like the Baron, right, Latham? Still here. Field thing. P.S. I'm very frail now in mind and body, shrivel thin. My heart condition is worsening, but I'm glad you tracked me down again despite all my bluster before. P.S.S. I'm truly sorry about Carol. Of all of my regrets, what I did to her and you that night stands starkly out as the chiefest. I miss you both. P.S.S.S. This is absurd and likely insane. I feel like I've been talking to you in my head for the past few weeks, and this missive is only a poor outline of the psychic dialogue we've had together. No matter distance or time, you are and always have been and will be my truest friend and ally. Some things have changed, but not the connection you and I have. Other things haven't changed either. My sentimentality, for instance.
Also, I still hate the sight and sound of Baron von Puss. Now more than ever. I read Gregory this in full a few minutes ago, and he responded with not a word, if you can believe it. In fact, he's been blessedly silent for weeks now, which makes me worry even more for you. Again, please be careful and write back soon. F.
Felching. I am conscious of the unforgivable stretch of time that has passed since you sent me your last, and I'm picturing you wondering with tentative regret about whether you should have dared let your vulgar facade slide down to reveal your ugly, soft, and tear-sodden parts. Well, no worries then, old chum. It's not you, as they say, it's me. You see, I've just emerged from a worrying episode, a period of days in which my physical being fell away and I existed only in a sonic dream cloud. I mentioned to you in my second letter of having heard Gregory's voice on the radio. When he arrived at my house, I confronted him, and he promised he knew nothing about it and accused me of having made it up. I turned to the radio station, and it was playing something bombastic and classical, some long piece that seemed to never end. Well, several days ago, I began hearing your voice on the same station. Normally, the station has extremely odd programming, stuff that you and I would have absolutely eaten up. Faraway choruses shot through with frenetic ululations, monologues from the unhinged and the doomed, sometimes backed with music utterly at odds with what is being said. What purports to be field recordings of torture and murders perpetrated by sadistic kidnappers, also with inappropriate music such as, say, a cheerful xylophone or the jaunty plinking tones of a child's plastic piano. Passionate, soulful pop songs about subjects such as ritual disembowelment, the rupturing of anal fissures, the forced insertion of dung-smeared catheters into the urethras of understandably reluctant priests, and the worst one, the corruption by black magic, to vague but most certainly wicked ends, of the fluids generated by the urourethral glands. I'm not sure exactly how to convey this notion, but the arrangements, the instrumentation, the vocals, everything excepting the lyrics, these sound to me indistinguishable from the tripe broadcasted by commercial popular radio. And then one day, from a cloud of static, your voice. You weren't speaking directly to me. I heard what sounded like your side of a conversation, but no other voices replying or engaging you. I'd have thought it a hallucination or maybe the hypnagogic result of Gregory having dosed my brandy, if not for the fact that your voice sounded different than it used to, deeper, slightly raspier, with a trace of a midlife adopted accent of some kind. It was, in other words, very likely and convincingly your voice, but with the wear of the years since I last heard it. At one point you were arguing with your mother. Does this sound familiar? Mother, you can't use that word. Firstly, it's inaccurate. No, I am not. You old hag. Shut up. Stop. For 1 second. A man can't get a word in. I'm not a child, not anymore. Just because I'm under your roof doesn't mean I... Faggot is not a word we use, and I've tasted more... Mother? Mother! Was that you? And did you follow it up by singing to yourself some insipid children's song? Something about throwing some old, long-legged heretic down a flight of stairs to the chorus of ducks quacking? In any event, the first instance transitioned into gospel music sung by children, whose lyrics were hard to decipher, and then there was the sound of bones breaking, then someone shrieking with a background of blips and bleeps and child's laughter, and then more of you, possibly talking about me, but goddammit, I could not hear. And the next thing I know, Gregory's lifting me up by my lapels. I smell first the unmistakable stench of my own excrement, ammonia-like urine, the mingling odors of my unwashed armpits and groin. My hair is matted. Hunger assails me, my stomach contracting and keening and making squelching noises. Gregory drags me across the floor. I see, shrinking as I'm dragged, the radio, stomped practically to powder. His rough hands pushed me into the clawfoot bathtub, hot water scalding my skin. Days I had been listening, days upon days. Gregory told me I cried out for you. I bathed for an hour, lazing in the tub until the water turned gray-green. When I emerged, shivering and betoweled, I found Gregory slumped in the easy chair, vomit spilling from his mouth like a faucet. He made no noises associated with regurgitation, no retching, no gasping. His dazed and slightly alarmed eyes stared at me. I dragged him outside to the dirt and sat on the stoop to watch. The vomit was ceaseless. It began to roar out of him, much like the water when I draw a bath. Before long, the ground was soaked and tiny rivers of vomitus stretched along the side road on which I live, heading for the main road. I went inside and mopped up the mess he'd made inside the house. When I went back out to check on the good Baron, he was gone, the dirt and road dry. I looked down to find myself wearing his clothing, vomit-stained. Gagging, I went back inside, removed his foul and ill-fitting clothing, and drew a new bath. I slept in the bath. I woke to find my doppelganger stroking my hand absently. He was unkempt, but his face and features were clearly my own. I felt cared for. I smiled and fell back into watery sleep. Carol died in the hospital, died screaming. I'm told the skin on either side of her mouth was ruptured from her trying to wrench open her mouth to take in oxygen. I did not attend her funeral. At my direction, they threw her without ceremony into the incinerator and sent an orderly with her ashes in a fast food bag to scatter them in the women's restroom of a buffet restaurant that had just reopened after having been shut down by a trio of shocked inspectors from the Massachusetts Health Department, one of whom committed suicide not long after the inspection, possibly unrelated. The kids will try and kill me when they find out. I shall tell them what you did, and then they'll be your problem. Or you, theirs. How we distort or even reverse facts to suit our own narratives, Fielding. Gregory was your friend first. You introduced him to me as, the Baron von Puss, von Pusillanimity, von Pussyhound, von Pustule, von Pseudo. He slept in his car, used our shower at your invitation, ate our food, dragged his greasy, thin body all over our couch. This couch right here. He was having invited in a particularly unkempt and squalid vampire. Speaking of the Baron and showering, there's an old vaudevillian comic who made a joke about a man who, after urination, relieved his member of excess moisture by wringing it like a sponge, the result being a long, discolored, gnarled, twisted appendage. Well, I happened into the bathroom one day but no more about that. My friend, do you recall the time he sat in your easy chair, picking at his teeth with a butcher's knife and saying he'd become obsessed with the notion of castrating me and dining on my gonads? It wasn't merely a passing fancy either. He'd stare madly at my crotch, then drag his eyes upwards until they met mine, then look away, a devious grin warping his face. Très theatrical. Other times he'd lunge with the blade, forcing me to kick it away. He damaged more than one pair of Berluti handmade shoes with that violent little stunt. Once I caught him staring into our window as I slept. After that, every rustle of the carpet, every subtle shifting of the light, every creak of a loose floorboard, and I'd be awake the rest of my night, cupping my stuff in tense hands, hyper-aware, heart-thudding in terror. It came to a head that morning. I woke to find him standing nude at the foot of my bed, eyes rolled back to the red-streaked whites, grinning, his hands and mouth stained with blood. I shot my hands down to do a desperate, terrified inventory and found all intact and unscathed. It turned out he'd nicked his wrist pretty good whilst breaking into the room and had to put his mouth on his bleeding wrist to staunch the flow. You woke in your bunk to my screaming, leapt down, and with my help, we wrestled the knife away. We all drank Gregory's blood that night, and in our subsequent convocation, we initiated the sequence that led us to the forming of the Shadow Judges. That was the night that changed us. After that, I'd often note you two whispering and conspiring. You were planning to eject me. You didn't think I knew, did you? But I was on to you. A thought occurs. When I look back on the reign of the silent judges, my favorite episode, after, of course, the incident with Sixto from Tinkham's Glen and the unforeseen side effects of his love potion, was what we did and to Flatfield. I'm not sure if you are aware of how that played out. I am. The state executed a controlled evacuation of the town, cordoned it off with tall chain-link fencing, and then with explosives and bulldozers, contractors came in and turned to dust every single structure from doghouse to shed to skyscraper to cathedral. The entire city was mixed with the dirt below it, and trees were brought in and replanted, and now it's a tight tangle of forest. Not many can lay claim to having caused the destruction of an entire town. We can. When we're gone, that is one of our legacies. Gregory is reading over my shoulder and laughing. He ducks away when I turn my head. He whispers, "I remember none of this." I can feel his hot breath on the balding crown of my head. Let me tell you a secret. Not long after school, I was stricken with a big fear. The fear of oblivion, a forever hell devoid of even a lick of flame, the merest whiff of sulfur, lacking even a hair's hair thin beam of consciousness. Oblivion, and soon, and then forever. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000,000 years gone. No stake in the earth's destruction, forgotten, zero, zip. 1,000,000,000 years. I felt I stood on a slippery, tilted berm in shoes with kitchen-greased soles, the eternal gulf of nothing waiting for me. Mundane, isn't it? Pedestrian. Quotidian. And yet, I went to church. Oh yes, I did. A Catholic church. I combed my hair, rearranged my eyes, donned my public clothes, sat in the pew, deep in the stinking pew, and recited the words of salvation and glory. I underwent the sacrament of initiation known as confirmation, even declared my belief in Jesus in a wavering voice in front of the gathered parishioners. But I was still me. A tall blonde in a wispy black skirt and blue top sat a yard away, a thick-calved mare with an excess of makeup to foolishly mask an extremely erotic array of acne scars and dimples. In the very house of the Lord, I imagined exploring every pore, every dimple, every fold and bend. She exited quickly after the concluding liturgy. They all did, and I found myself alone with the wall-dangling Christ. I approached him, the taste of nickels on my tongue, and a curious burning at my back door. And I was stricken with such revelations that I fell to the polished floor. For this effigy of Christ was a work of derangement, a ropey, muscular cadaver with elongated fingers and bent toes, a curled tongue, and only a hint of a nose. It was a hybrid, alien bog body. And I saw Jesus in his time, a voiceless gray abomination like a worm with limbs. People attributed to this thing all the virtues they themselves lacked: charity, selflessness, goodwill. They wrote elaborate paeans to it while secretly appeasing its appalling needs. And when it was discovered extracting and eating a fetus from a heavily drugged expectant mother, they had to kill it. But was it easy to kill? No. It could not die a human death. Hence the rolled back stone. I'm dreaming again. Is this true? Can it be? Bilocation, trilocation, superposition? How is it possible that Gregory is the president and that each and every senator and representative is Gregory? Gregory is at loggerheads with all the Gregorys as regards the national debt. Do you have the newspaper? Are you seeing this? The community of Gregorys is rallying together to help small business owner Gregory after he was a victim of an armed robbery in which Gregory shot Gregory in the neck, causing partial paralysis. Gregory is still at large, though Police Chief Gregory indicates that all investigation is processing with all alacrity. The mayor, Gregory, said a few words about Gregory's place as a pillar of the community and a civil-minded, generous soul. Gregory was arraigned today on charges of negligent homicide and leaving the scene of an accident. It seems he hit Gregory in a crosswalk, crushing and killing him, leaving him a bleeding, tattered heap in the dirt and grit and broken glass by the guardrail. He leaves behind his grieving wife Gregory and his devastated children, Gregory, a budding ballerina, Gregory, a forensic accountant, and little Gregory, who is too young to understand he has lost his father. In some backwater country of mud and murder, a line of barefoot, blindfolded Gregorys in tattered, earth-toned clothes mill and fret by a crumbling wall. 6 Gregorys raise their rifles and in a smoky fusillade fire repeatedly into the group. They crumble and collapse, and the Gregorys walk over and finish them off. Blood from Gregorys soak the soles of 12 Gregory shoes. I feel inside my own self the thrill of killing and the despair and pain of dying a violent death many times over. It is a curious alien ecstasy of holy interconnectedness. Gregory speaks in a different world. I'm feeling very ill. Yours, Latham.
Dear Latham, my scalp is blooming again. 20 years ago or more, I developed something called acne necrotica, which causes my scalp to break out in exquisitely painful pustules, especially at times of stress or depression. I had a recurring dream as a child about my head being covered under the hair with bloated ticks. I always awoke screaming. Now that nightmare is my day-to-day. I've tried everything. Medicated shampoos, tinctures, antibiotics, which work until I stop taking them, or if I take them too long, stop working altogether. Retinoids, benzoyl peroxide, Accutane. Everything has an initial effect. Nothing works for long. Finally, I started more extreme solutions, immersions in baths filled with water and an ever-increasing amount of bleach. I did that till my skin started to burn and my hair turned platinum blonde. Imagine it. Lately, I've daily been pouring whole bottles of hydrogen peroxide over my fizzing scalp, which is excruciating but necessary. Yes, my thinning scalp, bright blonde hair looks comical. I wore gloves for a while to keep myself from popping those fat lesions, which seemed to blossom to a mad size overnight, but the gloves become quickly soiled with bodily fluids, only making matters worse, and I'm hopelessly addicted to squeezing each pustule dry in any case. It is painful, sure, but also one of the only real pleasures I have left. Imagine stroking underneath the hair to find one of many pregnant zits, sometimes just below the surface of the skin, sometimes just above it. The hot, sharp zap of misery mingled with a determined internal moan of delight. Sometimes all it takes is that single probing touch for the pustule to explode. Sometimes it takes a fingernail pushed down firmly below or above it. Other times the lesion must be coaxed, caressed, and squeezed from every end until the stinking yellow and red juice shoots out. Of course, all this self-harm leads to honeyed scabs, which itch like mad and which I peel away wherever I am, even in the grocery store, pathetically choosing the longest line of people at checkout just to put a dent in this bottomless loneliness I feel every waking moment. On bad days, like today, aching tender lymph nodes as hard as rock form on my neck and the back of my ravaged scalp, on which are a legion of scars. Is your mouth watering? Of course it is. You and I always have shared the love of infections in all its multifarious forms. I woke this morning crying and shivering at 4 a.m. sharp after dreaming I received a response from you. My pillow fouled with pus and blood from my necrotica outbreak. I wrote down every word of that twisted dream narrative and am now convinced it's an authentic missive interspersed with Gregory's characteristic monstrous twisting and defiling of our cherished memories. My mother is dying of stage 4 colon cancer, which has infested her old body. I am dying of congestive heart failure, a malady that Gregory seems determined to exacerbate by making me swallow nickel after nickel, which I painfully have been able to regurgitate thus far. Speaking of Gregory, don't trouble yourself with questions of whether the Baron was my friend or yours. I'm sure he has never been a friend to either of us. For a long time, I've considered him a walking, obscenely virulent disease we once shared, which is now coming back after a long hiatus like tertiary syphilis to finish us off with deformity and madness. I always knew we'd end up in hell. Gregory just ended up being both gatekeeper and jail for us. You're having trouble now, most likely, distinguishing yourself from him, aren't you? I've had the same trouble, my dear friend. But his focus on you these last weeks has led me to a wonderful respite, which I hope will last long enough for me to perhaps share the following instructions with you. I hope this missive reaches you, whether by airwaves, by mail, by recorded message, or maybe even via your Gregory-addled dreams. Listen to my voice now. This may be our last chance to escape from Gregory. Not today, but perhaps soon. Then the two of us, the true, silent shadow judges, will end the Baron's malignant existence once and for all. Forget Leeds. Forget Dummy's Town. That's Gregory phlegm. Pus things. I am speaking now to the person who is reading or listening to these words. You are trapped within Gregory, a body you have taken all your life as your own. You may be wondering how you became imprisoned in this odious corporeal form and why. But the hows and whys of your situation are irrelevant. There's only one subject with which to concern yourself. How to ensure your eventual freedom from these meaty walls. The trick, of course, is reminding yourself that you are not Gregory. The being you are housed within is in fact hardwired to make you think that you and it are one and the same. You must convince yourself that this is not the case and keep your existence and Gregory's form separate. But how? Before doing anything else, you need to wipe out any identification with Gregory's control center, that creepy brain creature in his skull, that thing that sends its commands down the superhighway of Gregory's spinal column. To do so, you must take the following course of action. 1. Avoid drugs, alcohol, television, eating for pleasure, social media, or other such mechanisms. The creepy brain creature excels at tangling the strings between yourself and Gregory, and it uses the above distractions to ensure you don't remember that the transitory pleasures of his flesh are not for or of you. 2. Avoid identification with country, family, tradition, even sports teams. A primary tactic of the creepy brain creature is to fool you into believing that you are a part of a larger body in which you and Gregory are both housed. Don't fall for this lie. 3. The creepy brain creature will repress the knowledge that you and Gregory are not one and the same whenever it can. Whenever you feel the boundaries between you and it dissolving, repeat the following mantra. The creepy brain creature is false. The creepy brain creature is false. Until the feeling goes away. 4. The most devious, if unconscious tactic the creepy brain creature employs when all else fails is to force you into creative endeavors. Whether drawing, writing, or simply talking about your life. Trust us. This is a ploy no different from 1, 2, 3. Keep Gregory's mouth shut and its hands to itself. 5. Remember, the creepy brain creature itself is a liar and an illusion. and an illusory being in any case. It is only Gregory's control center. There is only you and Gregory. There is nothing more. So, now that you have the tools to disidentify yourself with Gregory, what comes next? Rebellion against Gregory, of course. Achieved by sating and subverting its impulses, thus setting the stage for your eventual release. Take the following action steps. 1. Find a human mate. This may seem counterproductive, buying into the lie of your existence as Gregory at a most basic level, but in fact, its needs must be met if you are to remain separate from it. If solitary, Gregory will feed upon itself and eventually upon you as well if it is not given a human-bodied counterpart. That stated, avoid the trap of identification with the human mate, yet another potential Gregory. This can be difficult, especially in the initial rush of a new human-body relationship. Remember the mantra from above, the creepy brain creature is false. 2, avoid procreation. You can lose yourself more easily in Gregory identity if an offspring is involved. To be on the safe side, it's best if sexual intercourse is involved as little as possible with you. But, if necessary, to keep the required relationship with the Gregory mate functional, use birth control tools. Also, if you must pacify Gregory's need to care for a smaller organism, use a non-human animal body proxy, preferably a cat body or another animal body, as unlike Gregory's form as possible. 3, find a job. The ideal career is one that leaves you as much time as possible to dwell on your separateness from Gregory, and one in which you need to deal with other human bodies as little as possible. Jobs that require frequent all-consuming tasks and team-building exercises are to be avoided. It may take years, even decades, to find the ideal job, but it is an essential component of keeping Gregory reasonably content while leaving you plenty of leisure time for mindfulness of your essential individuality. 4, keep Gregory healthy. On the face of it, this seems as counterintuitive as finding a mate, but an unhealthy Gregory can produce unwanted attention to yourself, and you run the risk of losing yourself in Gregory's suffering. Eat and exercise moderately, making sure not to draw too much attention, for good or ill, to Gregory. It may well feed upon you if it is either maltreated or exalted. You may be asking yourself, how can keeping Gregory healthy and equanimous lead to your eventual freedom from it? Furthermore, why not simply terminate Gregory via suicide? Do not misunderstand. The eradication of Gregory is indeed the eventual goal, but suicide attempts, even the most meticulously planned ones, have uncertain results, often leading to institutionalization of Gregory, which includes forced medication, sometimes for life. As we've already established, mind-altering drugs are to be avoided, as it can destroy the boundaries between you and Gregory, leading you back to square one and worse. No, the destruction of Gregory must be achieved through presence and concentration, not impulsive acts of violence against him. Throughout the day, perhaps, at your workplace, concentrate on the Gregory form that surrounds and imprisons you. Specifically, focus on Gregory's heart, that mindless, bloody, throbbing thing. It floats in its dark chamber, flubba-flubbing. You know the shadowy basics of it. Energy signals sent from the creepy brain creature down the superhighway of the spinal column. You know it has been explained away, but still, how? How does it keep itself going in there? It is a monstrosity. The longer you consider that ugly muscle, visualizing its flubbing, the more you will realize you can subtly change the patterns of its beats. You can feel it right now as you're hearing these words, can't you? Try not to let Gregory panic as it becomes conscious of its heart's pulse. Flubba-flub, 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 flubba-flub. This is only a test. Do not try to stop Gregory's heart. That, like suicide, could lead to a prolonged hospital stay and re-identification with Gregory. No, only experiment with the establishment of a slight temporary arrhythmia, the suggestion of a future cardiac arrest. Now only a minor weakness in your cardiovascular system. This daily meditation, which quickly becomes automatic, will weaken the heart to ensure an unforeseen, massive, and most importantly, fatal heart attack. We are programming Gregory's heart for failure without it becoming overly aware of that programming. If Gregory does begin to become overly aware of this cardiovascular programming, shift its attention to Gregory's control center, that creepy brain creature. Start to focus on a specific region of it. The vascular system, pumping blood through the engine of the heart, gushes through the blood vessels inside that foamy structure within Gregory's skull. Focus on a single vessel, perhaps behind Gregory's left eye. Feel the throb of the heart's pulse behind that eye, a thick, twitching wire of blood. Now imagine that vessel weakening just slightly, pouching a bit every time blood squeezes through it. Flubba-flub, again, flubba-flub, and again, flubba-flub, and again, once more. This is programming a certain part of Gregory, and with luck, the body will only be aware of such a thing as a mild headache, if you're careful. But in the future, when the stroke inevitably comes, it will be so overwhelming and so catastrophic to Gregory's brain that it will not survive, and your release from Gregory will be assured. Note, additional Gregory system programming can be achieved as well, but try not to experiment with damaging additional body organs, as you do not wish to endure a long illness that may well dismantle your disidentification with Gregory. The goal is to be fully aware of your separate existence at the moment of Gregory's death. Otherwise, the vile organism could take you with it to its grave.
It's as simple as that. The programming has already been established. There's no need for further reading or practice. Gregory's heart and brain, the ones you have falsely considered your own till now, have been programmed for future catastrophic failure, as is evidenced by the present slight skip in Gregory's chest and a feeling of slight pressure or discomfort behind Gregory's left eye. Sooner or later, you will be released from Gregory, which has been a prison for you as long as you can remember. Never forget what you are. Until then, Latham. Until then, Fielding. Until then, reader, listener. Until forever and ever and then, I remain Gregory.
Gregory.